seem to be a low energy room today.
The aura feels low.
Doesn't it? Maybe we should sing. Like Father Abraham. Maybe I should. Wow.
Well, that changes. Love you too, Daddy.
What? Is that authentic?
Yeah, that was authenticity. It also brought the energy level up.
Yeah, someone hit a button.
All right, did everybody get papers? Okay.
Pastor's words have always been, if I haven't offended you yet, just wait.
Yeah, wait, I'll get to you.
That was my turn.
Equal opportunity. Offenses for all. Speaking of offending, have you ever had to discipline somebody? Now, some of us, I'll say some of you because I'm really not that much, but some of us have been in positions of authority, responsibility, where we occasionally have to make sure that people for whom we're responsible stay in line. You ever had that happen? Now, parents, you're all in this boat. We're all in this boat together. Teenagers, you're not so much. You've probably been on the other end of this. Nobody's actually worked for you, but you've had parents and bosses. So what is the experience like when you have to discipline somebody? First of all, does anybody enjoy it? Let's get that off just in case. Oh, yeah, here you go. What do you call a sociopath who's also your friend? Yeah.
Someone who has really good heart and forgiveness.
No. A homeopath. Homie. Opath. That's a slow burn joke. Some of you will get that later. What's that? Hey, I thought of that one all by myself even. I didn't hear that one. So, you can laugh with me, laugh at me. I'm good either way. So, but I just thought of, who likes to discipline people. So what has the experience been like for you? If you've been in that situation before where you've had to discipline somebody, what is that situation like?
Very taxing.
Okay, very taxing.
It's a lot of work. It's a lot of energy expended that you really don't want to do.
Okay,
It takes a lot of patience. I babysit, so I kind of.
you babysit. Okay.
I think if you're a parent, it comes instantaneous because you see some behavior you don't like and you just zap it. But if you're a boss, it's a little bit different.
Yep.
Because you see this activity and you're not thrilled with it, and you may mention it quietly, but there is a tension that builds and builds until you finally have to put your foot down and have a come to Jesus meeting.
Okay, Katie.
Sometimes. Sometimes. It's a self-discipline.
Yes.
It does.
Is it worthwhile to do, to pursue? Okay. And sometimes those effects are not immediate. I think we could all agree on that. Speaking as a parent, I know that sometimes I have to discipline even my angelic children, lest they become demonic children. But the end results of it, we were out last night, went to see the Lesters in Pawtucket, and we were sitting there, and of course, we got there like right on the stroke of we're already late, so we sat in the back. The way the Pawtucket Church is laid out, we kind of got one of the wing sides in the back, and not the greatest seats, but again, with rambunctious kids, not a bad thing. Most of them didn't sleep much the night before because of the tent, etc. And they were hopped up on sugar and all this. So we're sitting there in the back, and they actually did really well. Luke sat and was Luke. Luke loves music. If you've never seen Luke when we're singing or music time, he's got the woohoo down at the end of the song, and he claps on beat and just loves. He sings along if he thinks he knows it. or kind of knows it. Sometimes more like, whatever. But Mrs. Lester, the kind of matriarch of the entire clan, was actually sitting right behind us. And as we were leaving, said, "Your kids were just awesome." So, that's, as a parent, you're like gratified that, wow, all of the effort that I expend disciplining my children, maintaining them, because it's just a constant maintenance thing, is worthwhile. Now, on the flip side of that, let's go to the flip side of how many of you have ever been disciplined before? So, teens, you're in on this one. You might as well just all get your hands up right now.
I know you're fine.
The good news is eventually we're going to be breaking you guys out into your own class, and so you have no more parents going, "Get your hand up." So, any of the adults in here been disciplined before? Welcome, welcome. Put my hand up twice. I was a kid once. I know that seems hard to believe. How many of you have ever liked that process? You liked being disciplined? No, okay. Scaring me. We got to go back to, what do you call a no. So what does that process feel like? It does not feel good at all. Need we say more? I think no. All right. 2 Thessalonians. We're going to be in 2 Thessalonians. Paul, as he's kind of wrapping up this second letter that he was writing to the church at Thessalonica, had to deal with some stuff. And the reality of church life is there's always stuff. I've been told, and I believe it to be true, that if you ever find a perfect church, don't join it, you'll mess it up. Because we all have stuff, and the fact that churches all have stuff is just a reflection that we all have stuff. And so Paul here in 2 Thessalonians is having to deal with some of the stuff that the church at Thessalonica was going through. So we're going to pick up in 2 Thessalonians chapter 3, and I believe, if memory serves, we're going to read through, pretty much the entire thing, well, the first 14 verses. So we'll leave the bye so long, see you later to homework. How's that? So 1 Thessalonians chapter 3, we're going to read, I'll start with verses 1 through 5. So we get a page number shout out?
625.
625. I heard 3 different page numbers. You can't all be in 2 Thessalonians 3.
My dad's right. Yeah, second. I think he's in first.
Which is why I'm like, this is not possible. I mean, unless you're not reading the Pew Bibles, which is fine. I have my own, and if you're on your phone, whatever. Okay, so can we get that one number again? 625. We all in agreement? Yeah. All right. Scary morning. Good grief in the morning. All right, so we'll pick up 1 Thessalonians chapter 3. I'll begin in verse 1. Just kind of pray around, read around. I guess you could pray too if you want, but read around. Finally, brethren, pray for us that the word of the Lord may run swiftly and be glorified, just as it is with you.
And that we may be delivered from unreasonable and wicked men, for not all have faith.
For the Lord is faithful, who will establish you and guard you from the evil one.
And we have confidence in the Lord concerning you, both that you do and will do the things we command you.
Okay, so how many of you wives have ever quoted one of those verses? Lord, deliver us from unreasonable men. So ladies, that may be your prayer right there. Out of context completely, but I think it works. So Paul here really is trying to underscore for the Thessalonians that they can have confidence in the Lord. They face adversity from without. Certainly we've talked at length that the culture around the church at Thessalonica, much like the culture around our church, is not always fond of the church. You would think they are. We have healing and hope and all of these things, but they're not. And so they faced adversity from outside of the church, from within their own culture, within sometimes their own families, and they faced adversity, bless you, from within the church. As you get stuff that you have to deal with. And Paul said, as you face all of this adversity, remember, God is going to deliver you. You can have hope in God. You can have confidence in the Lord. And for us, that's important, because when we face adversity, especially if we're facing adversity from without, and then we face some adversity from within at the same time, and we begin to feel like, the white stuff in an Oreo cookie, which in a vice is all being squished out. And we get that kind of feeling because it's just going to hit us from all sides. I mean, the reality is church ought to be the place where we don't face adversity. We just get encouragement, help, and hope, and all the good stuff. But sometimes bad stuff goes too. And so Paul says, look, even when you're facing all of that, we can still be confident in the Lord. And I say, TJ mentioned, I say it kind of jokingly, but it's true. If I have not offended you yet, please wait, I will get to you. It's not that I cavalierly seek to offend, but James said that, that where there's a lot of words, there is no shortage of sin. And I talk a lot, so I will get to you. It's not that I intend to, it's just going to happen. The reality is, I will offend, I will disappoint, I will let you down, just like anybody else in the room. But is your confidence in the people in the room, or is it in the Lord? In that moment of potential disillusionment, where's your faith? Is it in a person, or is it in God? And so Paul here is saying, look, you can have confidence in the Lord even when you don't have particular confidence in the people around you. Hopefully that confidence will be restored ere long, but it happens. And so we need to make sure our eyes are focused on the source of real confidence, not where it is. Why do you think people hate our faith particularly so intensely? Too many rules. Okay, we're going to talk about that this morning.
Because it convicts.
It convicts. Ooh. Yeah. Because if there is a right and a wrong, and I'm not doing it the right way, then I must be, and who likes to be wrong? Nobody. And so there is that element of conviction. Does that kind of accentuate the negative? That idea? Now, is that the idea we're selling? No, we kind of accentuate the positive, right? And so we just need to be aware that people, though we're selling the positive, they may be buying the negative, and that may be why they're not buying. So that's out there just to be aware of. Concretely, what kind of things in your life that you can share in public and with the internet, what kind of things in your life does confidence in God actually help? I know that's a big question to like.
To do things I don't think I can do.
Okay. Motivation. Okay. Kind of same. Motivation and actual the carrying through of and sustaining that strength. I know Debbie's been through a bit of an ordeal. Not that she's alone. Cindy's been through a massive ordeal. You both have been inspiring the way you've handled this. Can we agree on that? Everybody? Yeah. And I think that, and I know that's kind of where Debbie was going, that just the fact that there's confidence in the Lord brings you through those things that you never thought were humanly possible. It motivates you, but it sustains you as well.
It's knowing the fact that whenever I go through there.
Okay. That confidence that God's always going to be there for us. Good. He provides, certainly.
There are times when you feel that you're in such a dark place, there is no place to go, humanly.
Yep.
And that's the time when Psalm 23 is right there. The valley of the shadow of death, and we've all been there.
Yes. Yes, we have. And the interesting thing, and I sometimes come back to this, is in times of darkness, when you feel like you need motivation, you need sustenance, you need provision, you need all of these things, what's the major underlying temptation we face or desire that we have? Is to quit. But here's the question. Where do you quit to?
There's nowhere to go.
There's just no place. There's no place to quit to. And that's probably the great illusion of life, is that there's some way out. Not really. At the end of the day, you're going through one way or another. So you can have confidence in the Lord and go through it with a modicum of humanity and positivity and courage and motivation and provision and all of these things, or you could be miserable through it, but you're going through it either way. So the choice is kind of up to us. Do we want to have confidence in the Lord? Do we not? The reality is life isn't going to change a terrible lot except for how we face it. Then he goes on to, in our state, in our country, in our world, a section that may be harder for some. Verse 6, wherever we left off.
Now we command you, brethren, in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, that ye withdraw yourselves from every brother that walketh disorderly, and not after the tradition which he received of us.
For yourselves know how ye ought to follow us, for we have behaved not ourselves disorderly among you,
Nor did we eat anyone's bread free of charge, but worked and labored and toiled night and day, that we might not be a burden to any of you.
Not because we do not have authority, but to make ourselves an example of how you should follow us.
For even when we were with you, I commanded you this, anyone will not work, neither shall he eat.
We say this because we hear that there are some among you who live lazy lives, and who do nothing except meddle in other people's business.
And then verse 12, where are we? Is that me? Okay.
Those
Nope.
who are such, we command and exhort you, our Lord Jesus Christ, that they work in quietness and eat their own bread.
Okay. Wow. Tough stuff, right? Paul here. Now Paul worked, and he underlies this statement. He actually introduces two thoughts kind of simultaneously here. We'll hit the second one. We'll come back to the first. But Paul gave us the idea that work is required. It's just part of life. And he says to the Thessalonians, look, when I was there, I worked, I provided for my own needs. Now, Paul, anybody know Paul's trade offhand? He was a tent maker. And so you get this idea of tent making is because Paul was a tent maker. That's literally what he did despite all of his education. In the day and age in which he lived, all Jewish men were required to know a bit about the law, and they were required to have a profession. And then after a while, they could diverge into study or work, physical labor, but they were always going to have both as a part of their lives. That tradition actually, I think, continues even to our own day. And I know we have all the jokes and stuff, but the reality is there is just an expectation within Jewish culture particularly that you're going to have a trade that does pay. And you will work at it, and you will make money. And that's not a joke. That's a biblical, scriptural principle in action. So all joking aside. So Paul says, look, I was there. I worked hard providing for my own needs. He said, not that I didn't have authority. The implication being that Paul had, as the planter of the church at Thessalonica, he had an absolute God-given right to receive a salary, but chose to forego. And he carries this out in many other different places that he talks about in the New Testament. It seems like a lot of churches had this idea, or Paul just wanted to make sure they had the idea, rather, that the guy who is working in your life should be rewarded financially. And so he was telling them, look, I've got the right to it. I have the authority to draw salary from the church. He said, but I'm not doing it because my interest isn't in money. My interest is in helping you. And I want to make sure you understand by my lifestyle and testimony that work is that essential for you. But what he faced in the church at Thessalonica is that there were people who decided they didn't want to work. Where was the original welfare agency ever birthed in the entire world? Church. Absolutely, the church used to be where you would go when you needed help. And it still happens a little bit here and there. But long before government got involved in welfare, church was already up to its ears in welfare. And so there were people who were coming to the church who were getting help from the church but refusing to actually do anything labor-wise. And Paul said, this just doesn't work. Doesn't function properly. People ought to work. Because what happens when we don't work is it promotes other vices. And he said, look, you've got some busybodies. You've got people who their only interest is what everybody else is doing. Ever met them? You know, the only thing I'm going to labor in is telling everybody everything about your life and their life. And then you have people who make it their business and their work to tell other people about other people's lives. Anyway, we don't want to digress there too far afield, do we? Because gossip is something we all hate unless we're doing it. It's like the joke that says, listen up, ladies, I don't like to repeat gossip, so I'm only going to say this once. My wife told me that one. Yeah, my wife told me that one. No.
Your wife told everyone.
See, she steals my best punchlines. So, okay, well, there we go. We have one laugh. Thank you. Laughing with me. The rest of you laughing at me are good. I'm good with it. It's fine. And so Paul, but he lays this out there in very, very certain terms. You know, you will work. What's interesting, and I've heard every once in a while people talk about, oh, you know, work is a result of the curse. We're fallen, and so we have to work. Is that true?
No, I think it's a gift.
It is a gift. You think about, go all the way back, push all the way back to the book of Genesis. Think about the sequence of events. God created Adam and Eve. He built them a nice garden. I'm assuming there was a cover somewhere in there, and he put them in the garden. Interestingly, he didn't provide them clothes. Whole different argument. He put them in the garden, and he says, what? Right, he said, take care of it. Right, I put it here. You're going to work to maintain it. Had they sinned yet? No. So work preceded sin. So we can't say, oh, work is a part of the curse. Work is a part of our fallen existence. The reality is God designed us to have purpose, to do something. I mean, if you sit around all day doing nothing, you are not fulfilling your purpose, and it is just torture on your emotional state. And so we need to be busy as part of the way God designed and wired us. Now, can you take that too far to the other side? Yeah, I've met workaholics. People who just work all the time. They ignore their children and their family, and it gives us great music, perhaps. Cats in the cradle. But does it really give us a good life? No. And so we can push that too far. Now, in our culture, we seem to have, we've got the people who work too hard, the people who don't work enough, and then a lot of us just kind of slogging along in the middle. And that's probably where most of us are. But Paul was addressing here with the church of Thessalonica. They had some people who didn't want to work, and they were trying to make this a godly thing. And Paul's like, no, that's not godly. So next time you're feeling lazy, don't blame it on God. Just do something. Unless you're vacating, which is also, rest is a God-given thing as well. And then verses 13 and 14, Paul's going to wrap up actually what was the first thought he gave us in the verses we just read, because there was two. So wherever we are, let's get 13.
But as for you, brethren, do not grow weary in doing things.
And if anyone does not obey our word in this epistle, note that person and do not keep company with him, that he may be ashamed. We'll go ahead, 15.
Yet do not count him as an enemy, but admonish him as a brother.
Okay. The other thing that Paul talked about in those verses was people who walk disorderly and how we're going to react and how we're going to respond to them. While talking about work may be hard for people within our culture, this latter part is actually hard for people within our community, our church community. And Paul said there are times where we need to disassociate ourselves from people within our own church community for their good and ours. And he broaches this issue of discipline, which is kind of where we started our thoughts this morning, in how many of us like to be disciplined, do we like disciplining others? And this is not popular in 21st century American church. But there are times and places where it is absolutely appropriate and necessary to discipline somebody. To say, look, you get it together or you stay home. Or you get it together, or we're going to kind of, put a little distance from us, not because we hate you, but because we love you and we want you to do what is right. Now, you think about a church community this way. Are we relatively tight here? I think we are. It's not always been true here, but I think our church community here is pretty tight. I just spent the weekend with half your kids. So if I look a little bleary-eyed, understand. I made 10 pizzas Friday night. Yeah. Yeah, and they tasted good. They were awesome. You can't buy 10 pizzas. I mean, you can, not without a loan. And so it's a lot cheaper to actually make your own. So we did this. So we have a pretty tight church. Can you imagine a scenario where, say, I came to you and said, I see this is wrong in your life, and you need to fix it, because not only is this bad for you, but your behavior is bad for us as a church. It's reflecting badly upon us, and it's reflecting badly upon the name of Christ. And you said, Pastor, thanks for the thought, but no. And so, knock on your door again a week later, got some peeps with me, the deacons, and we say, look, we see this as a problem in your life, and it's bad for you, and it's bad for us, and it's bad for the kingdom. And you say, thanks for the thought, but no. We reach a point at some point where we say, okay, that whole membership thing, let's push pause. That whole tight thing, we're going to push you away a little bit. Now, that sounds mean, doesn't it? It sounds hurtful, and it is by design. Because the idea, and the tighter a church community is, the more effective this actually is. Because if your life is tightly interwoven with all of our lives, and suddenly we're ignoring you, for lack of a better word, after a while, you're going to get a wake-up call from within going, I'm lonely, I'm bored, I miss my friends. I miss the relationship we had. I miss my relationship with God. Is it worth the price I'm paying to do this, which is wrong and which has been made very clear to me is wrong? And at some point, you ask yourself, is it worth the question? Is it worth the price? And hopefully, the answer is no, and you say, whatever this is, I need to give this up because it's hurting me. It's wrong. It's hurting my church. It's hurting my family now. It's hurting the kingdom. It's not helping anybody, and so I'm going to give it up. And then you make a call. The thing, you're right. And we say, reel you back in. Hugs and loves and tears and kisses. And we go on. That's the nature of discipline within a church context. Not because we want to rule your life. Not because we want to be mean, nasty people. But because we love you and we want what is best for you. Now, the good news is, in a healthy church environment, this happens very rarely. Honestly, I think I can count on one hand, probably where I'm missing a couple fingers, the number of times I've seen this done necessarily. I've seen it done a few times where it was abused, but done necessarily, and it's not happened here under my tenure at all. Which is not to say I haven't gone to people and said, I see this, might need to work on this. I try to do a lot of this stuff up there. It just works better because you can't object. But when you hear people talk about church discipline, in the 21st century, people recoil at the thought. Church and discipline seems like oxymoron. But the reality is, if you are walking in a way that is going to hurt yourself, it's going to hurt your family, it's going to hurt our church, and it's going to hurt God's work in our community, we, as a matter of love, have a responsibility to help you put on the brakes. And it's the same way that we as parents discipline our children. It's the same way that we as people of authority in a work context may need to discipline those who are under us. It's not that we're punishing, and it's not that we're judging. It's that we're loving you, and we don't want to see you hurt. And so Paul says, sometimes believers, family members within a church context are going to need to discipline other people. And what Paul was facing was specifically here, people who refuse to work and refuse to stop talking about people. That poses a problem because we're not created to not work, and we're not created really to talk about people. He says, look, you're not living God's best for you. We need to deal with that. In Corinthians, they had a whole different, moral issue going on that just was bad. The church at Corinth is a great object lesson. The church at Corinth, and we find in 1 Corinthians, had a ton of problems. But Paul only went to this measure a couple times. So it's not something that's going to happen often. But when you're approaching danger, we as your church family have an obligation to you to try to keep you from danger. And so Paul says sometimes we're going to have to do that. Is it fun? Is it fun to be disciplined? Is it fun to discipline? No. So just remember that, when we come knocking, it's not because we want to be there. It's because if we're there, you're already in danger. And it's really a matter of love. So sometimes we're going to have to correct disobedient brethren. Sometimes, all the time, we're going to need to work to make a living. Through it all, we can still have confidence in God. 1 Thessalonians 3. Any questions? Comments? This is kind of rubber meets the road section of Thessalonians, isn't it? It's like, wow, ouch time. Anybody?
Here's another side of that, too, though.
Okay.
And the other side of that is the health of your family,
Mhm.
health of your workplace, and in particular, the health of the church.
Yep.
If you have somebody who is constantly causing themselves danger, it could infect
And
others
infect.
around you. And,
Yep.
and that could hurt the church. And so it's necessary, absolutely necessary, to draw attention to that and say, no, this
Yep.
is not appropriate.
Absolutely.
Appropriate is too soft a word.
Yeah. I've heard, sin termed as a disease, as a cancer. We think of it in those things, and it does spread. It is contagious. And you get one person that's bitter, and if somebody doesn't deal with it, it's going to spread. Guaranteed. I've seen it happen.
If you let it slide, it is viewed as acceptable behavior.
Right. Oh, this is cool here. No, you don't have to tuck in your shirt, but you got to have some measure somewhere. So absolutely, for the health of the church. Anybody else? Last thoughts? All right, let's pray. Father, we love you. Thank you that you love us. We thank you for your word that you've given us. Lord, we deal with sometimes difficult ideas, and yet we see in that it really is an extension of your love for us, that we would love each other, that we would care for each other, that we would watch out for each other, even if sometimes that may put us in difficult situations. Father, if it comes up, may we always have a heart to restore, a heart of love. Father, may we ultimately just live lives in such a way that we don't need to worry about this. That's our desire. Father, would you meet with us the next hour? Would you motivate your family to join here in worship and in song and in preaching and in prayer and in giving and all the things that we do? May we glorify you today, and would you be glorified in our midst. In Jesus' good name.